Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Your Path to Net Zero Hero, Career Insights for Sustainability Professionals. The goal of this panel discussion will be to learn critical steps to building skills, working on innovative teams, and position your career to work on net zero projects. My name is Brandon Pajczynski, and I'm one of the co-chairs for the Illinois Green Alliance Auxiliary Board, who put on today's webinar. The team that put on today's event is Caitlin Veenstra, Tyler Morris, Prachi Sharma, Adam Householder, Hardik Miani, Annalise Dunn, and Miranda Wright. You all have been muted upon entry, so please type any questions you have into the chat and we will get them answered during the Q&A. This webinar is being recorded and will be sent out in a follow-up email. To begin this event, we will be sending out a poll to you all right now to guide our panelists as they answer questions from our moderator. Illinois Green Alliance is a membership-driven nonprofit organization that advances green buildings and sustainable communities for all. Our recently launched 5-year strategic plan pushes the green building industry to meet or get on the path to net zero. We achieve this work through educational events such as panels and building tours, by engaging communities and partnering with organizations across Illinois, and by advocating for new policies and legislation. Members can view our recorded webinars on our on-demand webinar library. Check out Illinois Green Alliance's events calendar and our Connect and Learn online page for upcoming webinars. Illinois Green Alliance's Auxiliary Board is a diverse group of emerging professionals passionate about green building and sustainability. The Auxiliary Board supports Illinois Green Alliance's strategic plan by organizing community engagement and educational events throughout the year. Some of our past events have included Orbit Your Network, Speed Networking Night, Race to Net Zero 5K, Sustainability Credential Soup, and the Sustainability Day Camp. Applications to join the Auxiliary Board in 2022 are open now until November 15th. The link to submit an application will be posted in the chat, but you can also find it on Illinois Green Alliance's webpage. Next, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Annalise Dunn. Annalise serves as a Senior Sustainability Project Manager in JLL's Project and Development Services team in Chicago. As a consultant for a diverse portfolio of clients, she is responsible for directing building certifications and strategically guiding occupier and investor clients in aligning their commercial real estate portfolios with organizational ESG goals. To date, she has over 100 new construction and renovation projects in her portfolio and has managed certifications for 15 million plus square feet of space. Annalise holds a master's degree in sustainability leadership from Arizona State University, a bachelor's degree in interior design with minors in communication and Spanish from Purdue University, a plant-based nutrition certificate from eCornell, and is a member of the Illinois Green Alliance's Auxiliary Board. Thank you, Annalise.
Thank you so much, Brandon. I really appreciate it. Now I'd like to introduce each of today's panelists. After I share, I'll turn it over to each panelist individually so they can tell you a little bit more about themselves before we dive into our moderated Q&A. First up is Kemena Brooks. Kemena Brooks, Senior Project Manager, leads the development of several mixed income housing and community assets for the Community Builders Chicago office. Her current focus is on furthering the redevelopment of Oakwood Shores, a 100-acre transformation site in the Bronzeville neighborhood, and bringing catalytic physical investments to the West Side neighborhoods impacted by low life expectancies. Kemena is also leading the development of one of the city's first carbon neutral mixed income residential buildings in Chicago's Loop. Kemena is a Goldie Initiative Scholar, an associate board member of the Greater Chicago YMCA, serves on the board of Innovative Housing Solutions Foundation, and is currently pursuing an MBA at Loyola University Chicago. Thanks, Kemena. Next up is David Pope. David is president of the Oak Park Residence Corporation, a not-for-profit owner of economically integrated, high-quality multifamily housing communities that advance affordability and diversity. Prior to this role, he spent much of his career as a corporate strategy consultant, including as the principal for Price Waterhouse and PwC. He also served from 2005 through 2013 as mayor of Oak Park, Illinois, helping to transform Oak Park into the national leader in regional housing collaboration, smart grid infrastructure deployment, renewable power adoption, and multi-jurisdictional investment in early childhood education, as well as serving in the leadership of the United States Conference of Mayors. David is an Austin Fellow at Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management, where he did his MBA. He also served for 2.5 years at Peace Corps volunteer in rural Thailand. He currently lives in Oak Park with his wife, Beth, and their daughters, Elise and Vivian. Thanks for being here, David. And finally, Oliver Baumann. Oliver has 25 years of experience in design, commissioning, and measurement verification for high-performance buildings. In 2006, he started Baumann Consulting, successfully growing the business to a firm with international reputation. Building on his transatlantic experience, Oliver's expertise covers the entire life cycle of buildings, from innovative energy concepts, building simulation, commissioning, to building performance verification. As an advisory expert to building owners and project teams, Oliver also works to guide universities and communities to help and implement campus and community-wide integrative energy master plans. Thank you for being here, Oliver. And thank you to all 3 of our panelists for being here today. We're so excited to have you. I'm going to kick it over to each panelist individually now to tell you a little bit more about themselves. First to Kemena. Kemena, will you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Thank you, Annalise, and thank you to Illinois Green Alliance for the invitation to participate on today's panel. I'm truly looking forward to today's discussion with fellow panelists, David and Oliver. And as Annalise said, I'm Kemena Brooks, Senior Project Manager with the Community Builders. We are a mixed income housing and community developer with a regional office in Chicago. TCB, we're a vertically integrated firm with the real estate development, property management, as well as a department called Community Life, which provides wraparound services to the residents in the communities we serve. We've been in the city for 2 decades now and have developed nearly 2,000 units and hundreds of thousands of commercial, retail, and recreation space. I've been at TCB for 3 years and have had the pleasure to lead a mix of development types across the city, including a future phase of a 100-acre redevelopment, a 50,000 square foot wellness center development, and now a net zero mid-rise in the Loop. I've been working, I've been working in development for a decade. After getting a graduate degree in urban design, I jumped right into real estate development. I began my career in Charlotte, North Carolina, working a short stint at a local housing authority there in the city in their real estate development department. And then I went on to work for a private mixed income housing developer serving as a development manager. There I had the opportunity to lead the development of what ended up becoming the first lead for neighborhood developments in the state. And then 3 years ago, like I mentioned, I relocated to Chicago to work for the Community Builders as a senior project manager, continuing to work on mixed income housing and community developments. As I shared most recently, I have been fortunate to work on a net zero carbon neutral development in the Loop known as Assemble Chicago. The development concept for Assemble Chicago is in response to a C40 competition that was administered by the city. And for those that may not know C40, may not know about C40, it is essentially a network of mega cities committed to addressing climate change. Cities identify underutilized land to seek developments that address energy efficiency, sustainable building materials, circular economy, and water management. The site that the city of Chicago identified for the C40 competition, which we pursued, is in Chicago's Loop. And as you can see, it's adjacent to the Harold Washington Library, which is a landmark in the downtown area at the corner of State Street and Van Buren. The site is also adjacent to the L train and within walking distance to other amenities such as cultural centers and parks, as well as walking distance to employment. So all around, I mean, a really great site location. Our team, which includes lead architect Studio Gang, MEP and sustainability consultant DBHMS, and structural engineer Thornton Tomasetti, we proposed at this location, a part of our concept is 207 mixed income units and within a mixed use development. One of the goals of this development is to provide housing options in downtown for the essential workforce. And we're doing so by restricting units to households that make approximately 75,000 and below. So really targeting that essential downtown workforce, that there aren't a significant amount of opportunities for them to live and work downtown. And then in addition to housing, the development will also include 2 stories of commercial space that you can kind of see there that will overlook an improved public park. You know, I don't want to take up too much more time, so I'll just kind of quickly hit on some of the key points on how this project is achieving net zero and incorporating sustainable features. But when the building is designed to achieve net zero emissions, and you know, in our case, you know, thinking about net zero emissions and what that means, it's, you know, the balance between greenhouse gases that the project emits into the atmosphere and the amount that the project removes. So we are doing so by doing, you know, we're going to have a zero fossil fuel building. So there's not going to be any gas connection to this building. And you think about, you know, having residential and commercial. On the residential side, we are incorporating all electrical appliances that will also be sub-metered to track energy usage in the residential units. On the commercial side, we are actually pushing the envelope. We're going to do all electric for the retail tenants, and we will have a ground floor food hall. We will also have a health clinic that will be operated by Rush, and we have had a commitment from our commercial operators to an all-electric building. And I know that especially on the, like I said, on the food side, it will be a push. PV panels will have both on-site and off-site locations within 3 miles of the downtown to off-site energy usage. You know, there's tons of other factors. I won't go into it. I want to stop there, but we are pursuing embodied carbon reduction, waste reduction, zero waste in our commercial space, and looking at ways to manage water. Again, there's a lot of sustainability features in this project, but overall we see that the project features truly push the envelope on how sustainable design can be incorporated and benefit affordable mixed income developments. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kemena. We're so excited to hear more about how you positioned your career to be able to work on such an amazing project. So thanks for the thorough background. All right, let's kick it over to you, David. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. First, I want to start just by thanking Illinois Green, Annalise, you and your entire team. And also, I'm really pleased to be able to be here with Kemena and Oliver. As Annalise mentioned at the outset, I'm the president of the Oak Park Residents Corporation. We're an organization that exists to be able to help advance a commitment to high quality multifamily housing that also fosters both diversity and affordability. The way that we do that is by helping to ensure that the populations in all of our buildings include at least 20% of our units for individuals who earn 50% of the area median income or below. And those are individuals who, according to HUD, qualify as being very low income. The reason why we do that is because the sort of statistics over time demonstrate that the best way to be able to help break intergenerational cycles of poverty is to help provide for economically integrated environments and to be able to provide for individuals who are at the lowest end of the income spectrum to be able to live in economically integrated environments. So that's the commitment that we have. We are the second largest housing provider in Oak Park. We collectively, in terms of our ownership and management and oversight, are responsible for housing that serves 1,500 households in Oak Park, and we own 30 different buildings. Part of the reason why I got connected to this presentation is work that we're doing on a new development that we are going to be initiating, which is the redevelopment of a current site that we own. We have a 12-unit building on the current site. We're going to take that down, and we're proposing to build a 45-unit net zero building. This is a building that we envision will be actually the most significant net zero project in the entire upper Midwest. It's the sort of project that with the exception of places like the Chicago Loop, the core of downtown Milwaukee, the core of downtown Detroit, the core of downtown Buffalo or Indianapolis, or the Twin Cities. Once you get outside of those areas, you're looking at the prospect of more mid-rise construction. This is the sort of project that we can in fact build, but that does not exist in the climatic zone in which we find ourselves here in the Midwest. One of the biggest challenges of being able to build a net zero building, I always sort of assumed, given the challenges around winter here, that it was going to be a little more difficult to be able to figure out how to heat this thing in the winter. In fact, it turns out that it's ever so slightly more difficult to figure out how we're going to cool it in the summer. But the combination of those two elements, the real challenge of how cold it gets in the winter and how hot it gets in the summer, makes it more difficult to be able to make a net zero building work here as compared to, on one of the coasts, for example. So we've assembled a really compelling team. Synergy Construction is our general contractor. DBHMS is handling the MEP engineering for the building. Tom Bassett-Dilley, who many of you may know, Tom Bassett-Dilley Architects. Tom is the leading passive house architect in the Midwest. And Tom and his team are doing the energy modeling on this project. We have Cullen Construction Management, who is our owner's rep, who's helping us to be able to sort of work through this process. And we've been fortunate enough to obtain funding support from the Illinois Clean Energy Community Foundation to be able to help us make this project work. Our real goal with this project, and we'll get more into some of the career aspects as Annalise starts to ask questions. I'll just take one more minute to explain that our real goal with this is to help serve as a model and a catalyst, because at the end of the day, the affordable housing issues and also the energy efficiency issues are not going to be able to be solved by a single nonprofit, like us or anyone else doing a building like this. The way that we're going to have transformational change is by creating models that can serve as examples for others throughout the private market to begin to adopt many of the practices that we want to be able to encourage. So that's really what we want to do with this building. I'll be excited to talk a little bit more about both this project and also sort of how we got here. So thanks very much for having me.
Thank you so much, David. I'm excited to hear both from Kemena and David about these two net zero projects that David said are almost impossible to build in our climate zones, and yet two of our panelists are doing it. So we're going to ask you questions about how you made that happen. Thanks so much. Okay, last but not least, we have Oliver. Oliver, will you round us out?
Absolutely. Thanks for having us here. And so my name is Oliver Baumann. I started my career with studying mechanical engineering at the Technical University in Munich. I'm originally from Germany. And that was in 1989 when I started at the university. My focus back then, mechanical engineering, was on energy and power plant engineering. And I graduated in 1996, I believe. And during the last year of my studies, I started an internship at a local MEP firm in Munich. And I was lucky enough to write my diploma thesis with them. And my diploma thesis was with energy modeling. I energy modeled a hotel project that they built or designed in Berlin. So back then I was probably one of the first energy modelers that actually use energy modeling in commercial projects as part of an MEP design firm. And I stayed with that company for 10 years. That was my first 10 years of my career. I did dozens of energy audits. I did dozens of energy models for high performance and net zero energy buildings. So my first net zero energy building was probably close to 25 years ago, was two school buildings in Germany. The first one totally failed. Never made it to net zero energy. I learned a lot during that. The second one was much better. And I became project manager because with my experience back then, I knew enough of everything, mechanical systems, controls, even building envelope. I was lucky enough to work very closely with our internal building physics department and learned a ton about thermodynamics and the building enclosure. And I really took that then 10 years later and started my own company, Baumann Consulting in Washington, DC. A few years later, we expanded to Chicago. At the same time, we expanded back to Germany. So we have offices in Washington, DC, Chicago, and Frankfurt in Germany. And what we do today is really based on my own experience, on my own skill set. So we do more than half of our work is commissioning for new construction, for existing buildings, retro commissioning, monitoring-based commissioning. We work on several net zero energy projects here in the Chicago area, also in Washington, DC. We also do energy modeling, energy consulting. We do sustainability consulting. My firm certified hundreds of LEED buildings in Europe and in North America, most of them in the gold and platinum range. So we know how to work with high performance buildings. One project that I want to point out here, I think we have a picture on the next slide, is the Stavros Niarchos Foundation Cultural Center in Athens in Greece. This is a beautiful project, as you see on the picture. Renzo Piano is the architect. Arup did all the MEP designs. So Renzo Piano was based in Paris. The project is in Greece, in Athens. Arup is based in London mostly. We had a theater consultant in Connecticut. We were the commissioning agent. We worked on that project for 7 years, from really the start of the project until the closeout and monitoring. And this project was intended to be a zero carbon, operational carbon project. So that canopy that you see on the left side, this is an opera building. It's the National Opera of Greece. On the right side, this is the National Library of Greece. And the canopy is a PV panel. Key was to get the loads and the demand of those projects, of those buildings, down as low as possible so that that canopy, that PV canopy, can cover the remaining energy demand, which we achieved here. And this is really the principle that we use in all of our net zero energy and high performance projects. Not all of them make net zero energy, but most of them are really high performing buildings. Is that we use a loading order, how we call it. We address the energy demand first with passive technologies or passive strategies. We increase the efficiency of systems. We look around what energy resources can be shared, what's available in the neighborhood, in the adjacency. And then last but not least, we look at renewable energy resources. And we apply that on individual building level, but also on larger scale. We work with universities on campuses. We are currently working with the Henry Ford College in Dearborn, Michigan. We work with Sheridan College in Ontario. And we work also on city scale, where we help cities to dramatically reduce their carbon footprint and increase the energy efficiency. Now I'm pretty sure I have an opportunity to talk more about that later.
Thank you so much, Oliver, and thank you again, all three of you, for sharing a little bit more of your background. We're going to shift into some of our moderated questions now. So it looks like from the poll that we took earlier, a lot of today's attendees are in the architecture space, they're engineers, they're consultants, perhaps some people from GCs or developers, but it also looks like what people are trying to get out of today is essentially everything. They want to hear about net zero projects, they want inspiration, they want career advice. So hopefully we're going to be able to cover all of that today. We've talked a little bit about these net zero projects already. And speaking specifically to the part about how to transition into a role focused on sustainability, all three of you shared your unique backgrounds, and we're starting to be able to connect the dots on how you landed where you are. But I'm wondering if you can all speak a little bit to how did you find yourself here working on these sustainability projects? You know, what about sustainability or net zero originally piqued your interest, or what keeps you going every day? Kemena, do you want to kick us off?
Sure, I can. That's a great question. I'll say that I did not begin my career with a sustainability focus per se. I started with a passion and an interest in working on developments, working on real estate developments, particularly in underserved communities. And unfortunately, there's a direct correlation between, environmental injustice and low-income communities. And as many of you know, probably and are aware that low-income communities and Black and Latino communities are more likely to have higher levels of air pollutants and be more impacted by climate change than white communities of any socioeconomic status. I mean, just to lay out some of the stats, more than half of the people who live less than 2 miles of toxic waste facilities in the US are Black and Latino, while the latest census data shows that only 32% of the US population is Black and Latino. And then furthermore, 11.2% of Black children compared to 2.3% of white children are exposed to lead poisoning. And those are factors that contribute to, extended exposure contributes to brain damage and learning disabilities, and we can go on. But there's just a clear link between environmental injustice, low-income communities, and race dating back decades. And given my work predominantly serves low and moderate income households, I mean, it's not only right, but it's truly necessary that our developments focus on alleviating negative environmental factors. Therefore, projects that I'm involved with incorporate sustainable features in an effort to truly deliver what we, really clean, healthy housing and clean and healthy communities. Projects I work on, I'll say, may not always pursue necessarily certifications, but we really are ambitious about pursuing green standards. And TCB as an organization are certainly aware of the factors that impact low and moderate communities, moderate income communities. So, we have our own baseline sustainability standard that we implement on our projects, and then we start to layer in other standards on top of that in projects throughout the cities and neighborhoods in which we work. And then with the rise of net zero and carbon neutral buildings, we're also pursuing that level of sustainability on projects, as you saw with the most recent Assemble Chicago project in the Loop. And we're fortunate, I'll say, to have really a strong design and construction partners willing to brainstorm with us on ways to incorporate sustainable features within a budget that we and the parameters in which we work in, as well as finance partners. We get financing from city, states, and we've seen even with the newest and latest qualified allocation plan, which is you may hear QAP, which we utilize to pursue low-income housing tax credits to support our work. The IDA, the Illinois Housing Development Authority, its QAP really took a stance on really pushing the envelope on sustainability features. And, that certainly shows us that organizations are not only willing to say, hey, we want to support it, but they're saying, hey, we really want to finance projects that do both provide affordable housing, but also focus on sustainability. So, I'll say that that's sort of, how I kind of got into sustainability as an avenue, which, kind of intertwined with the work that I do in low-income housing communities.
Phenomenal. Thank you, Kemena. David and Oliver, who wants to follow that up?
Oliver, go ahead.
Oh, you're muted, Oliver.
Thank you. I think my start into sustainability and energy efficiency is really a big portion of or component of the sustainability that I'm working on. Started when I picked my career path as a mechanical engineer. Back then, I entered the energy and power plant industry, really on that scale. So I learned a lot about thermodynamics, fluid dynamics, controls, and I have solid foundations in that. And that's really something that I appreciate until today, because I can challenge when I see something or I hear something with just the bare physics that's behind it. And one of my elective courses in university was solar energy. That was back in the very early 90s, and we had one project. I remember that calculating and building a concept how solar energy in Africa could be used to generate hydrogen, and with pipelines we bring that to Europe. We had a concept for that. It was economically not feasible. It might be today, but who knows? So I think really that at the same time, my curiosity and challenging the status quo, that's my personality. If someone tells me, well, it's just the way it is, I do not accept that. I turn over rocks. I really want to make things better. And every project I approach with, well, let's make that better than the last one. And that's what keeps me going in my day-to-day work.
That's great. I think you're in good company with everybody here pushing the status quo. Absolutely. David, want to round up?
Sure. So, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and there was sort of an emerging recognition of some of the challenges that we faced from an environmental standpoint. And so I think I was surrounded by that sentiment. I was fortunate enough to spend some time in Maine as a kid growing up, where you're surrounded by nature, but you also sort of understand what the implications are. And although I was born in Oak Park and lived in Oak Park till I was 7, I moved to Philly and spent more of my growing up years in Philadelphia. And really, again, to the points I think that Kemena was raising, there are very different life experiences of people depending on the communities in which they're being raised, and the implications in terms of health are very significant. I did, as Annalise mentioned at the outset, I did become a Peace Corps volunteer, and went to serve in the Peace Corps in Thailand from 1990 to 1992, about 2.5 years. And while I was there, many of you will know Bill McKibben. He had just written a book called The End of Nature in 1989. And that ended up on our bookshelf in our Peace Corps office in Bangkok that we would come into every 6 months to be able to get shots and make sure we were all in okay shape. And I took that book and went back up to my village and was sitting out in a hut in rural northeastern Thailand reading Bill McKibben's take on the end of nature. And as I was surrounded by this stunningly beautiful nature, and it was really a pretty profound experience. So it's been something that's been an area of interest for me for a long time. But I have found in different experiences, both in my consulting work, but in really corporate strategy consulting, I've consulted for a variety of players, some even early on in the oil and gas industry. And there are varying levels of sort of sensitivity to what the implications are for the environment and different levels of focus. And one of the things that I really came to understand is you sort of need to meet people where they are. And you've got to figure out how to be able to work with them based on what their priority set is, to be able to help us figure out how to be able to advance more sustainable environmental initiatives. Couple other significant influences. There is a person here in Oak Park named Gary Kemena who started an organization called 7 Generations Ahead, which is an environmental sustainability organization that many of you with Illinois Green will be familiar with. They do a lot of consulting throughout the Midwest. But SGA has a sort of a profound impact on environmental sustainability initiatives, and it's wonderful to have them here in our backyard. So when I became mayor, I was able to really turn to them and look for guidance and assistance there. And then I also, just upon becoming either right before I became mayor or right after I became mayor, I got a chance to be able to spend some time with Bill McDonough, who many of you will know has written a book called Cradle to Cradle. If you've not had a chance to be able to read Cradle to Cradle, I highly recommend it. It really helps us to think about how we can be more intentional in the way that we are designing, constructing, utilizing, and then deconstructing and reconstructing or reusing materials throughout our society. And as Kemena mentioned, and Oliver has referenced, so much of what we do has to do, and so much of our impact on the environment has to do with what the implications are of our built environment. And we need to be thoughtful as it relates to that. So in my time, I was 37 when I was elected mayor, and environmental sustainability was a really important concern of mine and of people here in Oak Park. And so we really attempted to push the envelope to be able to try to help hold Oak Park forth as an entity that could be a real leader in helping to set an example and chart a course for what the future of the country could be.
Great. Thank you, David. I too am a huge Bill McDonough fan and love the idea of eliminating the concept of waste. So absolutely a huge fan there. I appreciate everybody's responses, and I find myself each panelist's response has resonated with me, and I feel similarly in my own experience. For me, what originally sparked my interest in sustainability and what keeps me going every day, what my why is ultimately altruistic. Like we've all talked about, this is the right thing, this is what's good. And yet, that doesn't get us very far sometimes in our professional careers, because we can't just say that to a client, for example. But for me, it's that why is sustainability and sustainability strategies is the right thing to do. As a big picture thinker, as a very much a futurist, I focus on the interconnectivity between all of our systems, not just our buildings and our operations, but between buildings, community development, broader global issues like poverty, food security, social equity. All of these things are intertwined. And so my focus on sustainability in buildings and the built environment really is driven from that bigger approach. And now as a professional at JLL, I can pitch this to my clients from a corporate perspective to say, these strategies make sense for business. We're hearing a lot, climate risk is financial risk. So most of our clients or most of the people we're dealing with, it ultimately comes down to money. So instead of just saying, hey, this is the right thing to do from a PR perspective, I can now, my why is showing my clients, for example, how they can make money on it and how they can make their employees happier because they're providing a healthier space for their office, for example. So that's my why, and thanks for letting me share a little bit too. So from our attendees today, it looks like, as I mentioned, we have a lot of attendees that are in the industry. They kind of are speaking to speak. They're maybe working on similar construction projects, but maybe they're not necessarily in a role that is able to focus on sustainability, or they haven't had the opportunity to work on a sustainability or a net zero project. So I think it would be really helpful if we heard some advice from each panelist. What advice would you give somebody looking to integrate net zero or sustainability strategies into a project? Where do they even start? Oliver, would you like to take this first?
I can take that one. So in my career, I've seen many attempts to integrate net zero energy and sustainability goals into a project. And the most successful projects were where that was the core of the mission of a project. And it was a clear commitment from the beginning on. I've seen many projects where there was an afterthought and someone came up and say, hey, why don't we do something green or do net zero energy when the project was already initiated. And often these attempts fail. So if you want to integrate energy efficiency, high performance, net zero energy, and even high sustainability goals into a project, make it clear from the beginning on that that is a clear goal, and get buy-in from everyone on the project, and also enable everyone as the owner, for example, or the architect, enable everyone on the project to pursue those goals and also think a little bit outside of the box. So that's really the challenging, the team and your collaborator. Don't give things for given just because that has been done that way in a previous project. What I try to do is, even though I'm very passionate about what I'm doing, my attempt is to take emotions out of discussions. And I see a lot emotional discussions about PV and energy efficiency and sustainability and materials and what works and what doesn't work. And let's put the facts on the table and then make a data-driven, a scientific decision and move forward. And that would be my advice.
That's great. Thank you. David?
Yeah, so I guess I want to throw something out that I might be a useful way for people to think about some of this. If you think about sort of a graphic or a table that has 2 columns and 2 rows. The 2 columns are sort of micro and macro. The 2 rows are sort of people and places. I put this together at one point when I was giving a presentation to a group of mayors as sort of a mayor's view of the world. And there are things in the micro people box, you know, which is Mrs. Smith's cat ended up the tree, you know, and the fire department came out and helped her get it down. You know, she's pleased about that. And people macro is more things that are really core to who we are as a culture. So economy, public health, public safety, diversity, cultures and traditions, public engagement, education, creativity, beauty, and the arts. They're the things that make us a population. Those are things that are really, really important to people. And so when we're thinking about the built environment, we're thinking about creating places, either at a micro level or a macro level. And one of the things that we're concerned about is environmental sustainability. We need to recognize that the people we're talking to, that may not be the first thing on their list. That may be the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 8th thing on their list. And it's difficult for us to make the argument that you know, environmental sustainability is the most important thing if they may believe that, you know, child welfare is the most important thing, or they may believe that housing is the most important thing, or they may believe that creativity, beauty, and the arts is the most important thing. And so what I've found is that if you're only shooting for sort of one of these things and you're not figuring out how to tie it into a lot of other collective interests that the clients or the different players that you're working with are also interested in, or the decision makers as it relates to zoning variances, as it relates to you know, elected officials, plan commissions, those sorts of things, that you're not as likely to be successful. And so if you're interested in being involved in sustainability, in my experience, it's actually really helpful not just to be an expert in sustainability, but actually to understand how that ties into other areas that are priorities for a lot of other people, so that you can help to be able to make the sort of case that I think, you know, each of us has talked a little bit about how we're advancing sustainability, but we're doing so in the context of helping, you know, Oliver's example in Greece is helping to advance the arts. You know, Kemena's comment about the project that they're looking at down on Van Buren in the Loop is helping to advance affordability. I mean, these are important initiatives that tie back into sustainability that I think are really critical elements for everybody to be thinking about.
Absolutely. Thanks, David. Kemena, do you have some advice to share?
Yeah, you know, David and Oliver both made some very key points. And in development, there are so many players that need to, you know, buy in, as David mentioned, to sustainability as well as other goals around the project. And then, you know, as Oliver mentioned, you know, put in sustainability at the onset. I think about in development how, you know, we work with you know, public officials and really, you know, align, like David said, aligning the sustainability goals with their mission. But then on the other side, we also are working with architects and engineers and contractors. And I think the important piece there is, you know, what are the sustainability goals, and what can, you know, what's the budget, and how can we incorporate the sustainability goals and all the other factors of the project within that budget, but making that goal known from the onset. And then that goal will help sort of drive some of the decisions around the project. And then, you know, for me, I'd say, you know, I go out and find the experts. You know, if we have a sustainability or a net zero, you know, priority on a project, I certainly seek out to find the experts in engineering and construction and design. You know, there are many in Chicago and across the region that are focused right now on net zero and environmental sustainability. Now, I would not consider myself at all an expert. You know, so don't call me for expert advice, but I can certainly direct you to the experts. And, you know, when we put together our design team, you know, for example, the Assemble Chicago project, we truly sought out team members focused on environmental impacts and not just carbon reduction, but also how do we give back to the earth. And, you know, Studio Gang is definitely a prime example of an organization focused on that. And then I say there, David mentioned different books that you can read. There's tons of literature out there of how to incorporate sustainable practices into projects, how to incorporate net zero, features into your project. Certainly do your own research. And I'm sure, Illinois Green Alliance is an organization that can connect you to reports and documents, as well as consultants doing this type of work. So I think that there's, not necessarily a one size fits all, but there's many different ways to really think about sustainability and how you incorporate it into your work, into your career and projects.
Absolutely. And as a consultant overseeing this type of work, that's the information that I'm absolutely providing clients and the different design team members that we work with as well. I would absolutely echo everybody's sentiment as far as getting at what the client's goal is, or getting at what the design team or whoever the team is that you're working with, what their goal is, not just sustainability as far as, environmental efficiency, but broader sustainability concepts like health and wellness, community impact, savings. Sustainability, we get hung up on that term a lot. So figuring out what the goals are, and then more likely than not, we're able to tie it back to incorporating sustainability in some way. I would also say it seems like we have a good amount of maybe architects, probably interior designers, engineers right now on the call who are wondering about, how do I even bring this up at my own firm internally? So not just how do we get clients or how do we get projects to work on this, but hey, I'm, a young designer, I'm a young engineer, and I care about this, but maybe it seems like it's not a priority for my firm or my company. How do I advance here? How do I bring this up? And I found myself in this same situation years ago when I was a practicing interior designer. I was waving my hand saying, we need to be working on LEED projects. We need to be specifying healthy materials. We need to be looking at the embodied carbon of our materials. And it's difficult and not encouraging when your coworkers or your firm maybe doesn't seem supportive of that. So I would also make the advice of, there's ways to incorporate sustainability or wellness relative to these goals and strategies we've talked about, without having to make sure you get a project where you can pursue LEED certification or you can pursue net zero. It's not a one size fits all, and it's not an all or nothing. There's absolutely ways that you, as a designer, architect, consultant, somebody at a GC firm, there's ways that you can be looking at this, specifying healthy materials as a designer, specifying Energy Star equipment as an engineer. Having these conversations and bringing these ideas to the table, I think, is a really good start for somebody that's maybe early on in their career and is going, this is important, but what do I do? So speaking of maybe helping those emerging professionals or professionals that are looking maybe to transition and to be more technically competent in this area, what skills, credentials, or relationships would you say are the most critical to advance your career when you're working on these types of projects or in general? Anybody want to volunteer to go first?
I can go first here.
Okay.
So I would really say it's and David and Kemena referred to that. This field that we're working on is not one specialty. It's a very holistic approach. And at the same time, you really need to understand your discipline and the fundamentals. And comparing that to professional athletes, for example, that it's probably funny that I, as a German, talk about baseball, but it's not enough to say I want to play baseball and I want to be a good baseball player. You really have to acquire all these skills that you need and the techniques, and you need to be solid with those skills. At the same time, you need to understand the game and the tactics and the strategies and even statistics in baseball. And we as professionals in our industry need to work in the same manner if we want to be superstars and super athletes and super professionals. And our industry, we need way more super professionals to drive that. So I would really say, learn your basics, learn your fundamentals, but also keep your eyes open and understand the the overall environment and where you're playing with. And also when you talk to different clients, yeah, we need to talk in a different way to a developer or a university or a municipality, depending on the projects. And we need to understand that and have all those skills available. If I'm up for betting, well, I take my bet out and I'm the better. And in the next inning, I'm the pitcher. I need to use different skills. And that is important. But the fundamentals, that is critical. If you don't have the fundamentals, it's difficult to survive and really give the right advice. And one last comment here. Doesn't matter whether you talk to a client or Annalise, you mentioned how do I bring that up in my company? Well, I'm in a very fortunate position here because I just make the rules in my company and I say what we do. But also I listen very carefully to my colleagues and employees. What I appreciate is if someone comes with a solution, not just, hey, we should do something. No, we should do this to achieve that. If you come to me, if you come to a client, present them a functioning and working solution, ideally with a business case behind it. And that's key for the success.
Absolutely. Bring a problem, bring a solution. That's a great tip, Oliver. David, I think you were going to go next.
Oliver hit on much of what I was going to say. Really, my focus was just going to be on your willingness to be able to learn from others, because this is a collaborative effort in a collaborative space. There are not a whole lot of high flyers who are going to be able to do any of this on their own. And so the ability to be able to draw in from others' learnings, I think, is really critically important. You know, our objective was to be able to build a building that would meet the mission affordability goals that we have, while at the same time achieving net zero and some accessibility requirements. But on the net zero side, you know, we're doing something that hasn't ever been done in this climate zone. And so we have people around the table from all different engineering strata, as well as design, as well as functional and operational users and implementers, trying to figure out how do we put together a plan that is going to be able to achieve net zero. And none of those players, all of whom have been very talented, none of those players are able to do any of this on their own. And so, you know, prospective solutions get surfaced. Others jump in and say, well, have we thought about X? Have we thought about Y? Have we thought about Z? And ultimately it all gets sort of assembled. It gets run through a model. We bring it back, we look at the results, and we end up iterating on it. And the best thinking is sort of emerging and floating to the top, but it's not any one individual's best thinking. It's the collective. And that's really, I think, the hallmark to a successful effort.
That's great. Thanks. Kemena?
Oliver and David certainly hit on several key points to answer that question. You know, I think also, as if an individual is looking to get into sustainability, environmental sustainability, I think, you know, the most obvious careers are architecture, engineering, and development. And those really contribute most directly to the built environment. But as David mentioned, you know, on sustainable projects, there are so many different groups around the table. And, you know, think about advocacy groups, other types of environmental consultants, material manufacturers, just to name a few of other ways that if you're interested in sustainability, there are certainly other ways that you can get into the sustainability field. I mean, in 2019, there was an article that came out, or articles, I can't say just one, there were many articles that came out saying the same thing, that the green economy generates 1.3 trillion in revenue, something like that, and employs more than 9.5 million people. There's new bills being passed and pushed at the current administration on green infrastructure, so those numbers could rise, and furthering the demand for employees in the green field, call it. So, you know, I think that there is certainly, there will certainly be a demand for employees focused on and individuals focused on sustainability. And as Oliver said, really, really developing the skills and the knowledge and the baseline awareness around sustainable factors is going to be key. And then, of course, sort of just the basic is start networking, jump on LinkedIn and just start connecting, messaging people, messaging individuals that are in the industry or in a portion of the industry that you might want to learn more about, and just connect with them and pick their brain before you shift too far down a path that you may not be as interested in the sustainability field. But again, sustainability is so many different components, and I think it's a matter of starting to drill in and see which pieces that you might be most interested in and want to plug in as a part of the field.
I think that's great, Kemena, and you're going to get so many LinkedIn requests after today's webinar. Everyone provided some really, really good advice. I think networking, I would absolutely echo that sentiment. And Kemena, to your point earlier about bringing in the experts, that's all of that relationship building, where if you don't know something, to Oliver's point and David's point about being technical experts, yes, absolutely. And you should know what you're talking about. But if there is an area or there's a specific, field or specific example where you need to bring in another expert, that's where that networking comes in and rounding out your network. Absolutely. If I could add one more piece of advice that I think is probably the most underappreciated skill is communication, and being able to translate that technical knowledge that you have into digestible content for whoever you're talking to. So I find myself doing this a lot as a consultant, whether I'm talking to the architect, the designer, the engineer, or on the flip side, if I'm talking to the client. I need to be able to translate the specific technical detail of our certification, of our sustainability advisory plan, whatever it may be. I need to be able to communicate it in the non-technical way, so that way whoever I'm talking to knows what we're doing, knows what the plan is, knows what the goal is, knows what the responsibilities are. So that's one of those soft skills, I would say, to complement the technical understanding of the certification or whatever we're talking about. Having that flip side communication to be able to translate it and communicate it out is going to allow for the effectiveness of whatever you're working on and ultimately the success. So we have just a few more minutes here. I do want to say that for everybody in the audience, thank you so much for joining us today. If there are additional questions, or if we're not able to get to all the audience questions today, we will look to address them and circulate some answers after our webinar today. And also our webinar is being recorded, so we'll be able to post the recording from Illinois Green Alliance after today. So one other question that we got, a couple people referenced books and resources. Kemena, I know you referenced some papers, some white papers, I think. If there was maybe one or two books that you all could recommend, is there one that you would say, this is where I would start, or, this is pie in the sky, but it is a really good example of some recommended reading? I think, David, also you recommended Bill McDonough's Cradle to Cradle. I would echo that sentiment, absolutely, and the sequel, The Upcycle. Kemena or Oliver or David, do you have any additional resources or books you would recommend?
For me, it's not really one book. I read a ton of books in many different fields, from how to be an effective communicator, how to prepare business plans, and then also the thermodynamics 101. It's all of it. And I think you want to be a well-rounded professional in order to succeed. So I would just say, don't read just one book, but keep reading, keep learning. I for myself, I have a goal for several years now to do one like a professional educational course or certification every year. 3 years ago, I became a certified passive house consultant. So I did a 1-week training and then passed the exam. A year later, I retook my commissioning professional certification from ASHRAE. Instead of just renewing it, I said, well, let's take the test again. I want to see where I am. And I did that every year. I do something new, and I actually sitting this year for the Building Enclosure Commissioning Professional exam. Curious how that goes.
That's great. Good luck, Oliver. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
If I were to name a book, a recent read of just finished, I guess the end of last year, is A World of Three Zeros by Muhammad Yunus. Zero poverty, zero unemployment, and zero net carbon emissions. That would be, one book that comes to mind that I would definitely say is a must read. But there are probably there's so many books out there, depending on your focus around sustainability and environmental justice that are out there. I just saw one on climate justice that I think is ranked #2 right now, just behind Cradle to Cradle. So there's different books out there that you can probably get your hands on nowadays.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everybody. We are at our time here. We want to extend a very, very huge thank you. Thank you very much for joining us, to our 3 panelists, Kemena Brooks, David Pope, and Oliver Baumann. And thank you to everybody in the audience today. As a reminder, our webinar for today was recorded and will be posted by Illinois Green Alliance. Thank you so much, everybody, and we hope everyone has a great day.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.